right, good morning, everybody. Today is Friday. Yay, it's Friday, March 24th, 2017. And this is Before the First Cup of Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Friday, everyone. It is a drippy 33 degrees and very sloppy, slushy here in upstate New York. Finally, the snow is all starting to melt. So where do we leave off yesterday? We titled the show Gwen Towers, Weaponized Neuroscience, DARPA, and the Internet of Things Surveillance. Oops, yes, that's what it's come to. We have pacemakers blowing in their owners for insurance fraud, and Google getting the green light for a very large, sweeping handover of search data out of Minnesota. So they're trying to track down an extortionist who stole someone's identity and robbed $28,000 out of a bank account using forged documents from pictures they found on the internet. It is frightening. You know, we have talked about enchanted objects and about the Internet of Things. We saw that Amazon Echo had also been subpoenaed some of the data from a gentleman, and he was accused of murder. And they were subpoenaing his Amazon Echo data to be able to determine whether or not he actually was there, whether or not something really happened. And as this goes on, our devices becoming smarter around us, and they're integrating cameras. I mean, we already knew about the Samsung TVs, and they had warned, don't talk around your TV. But, you know, even though that was mainstream news, if you say stuff like that around a majority of American people, I think people from other countries get it. I think they know that our alphabet agencies are out of control, but apparently in this country we don't. But if you even mention the TV spying or Samsung or NSA or any of that around just the normal everyday Joe in the United States, guess what? And no offense to you, Joe. It's just like Johnny. It's one of those names. But, an all-American Johnny, I hate to tell you, but they're going to look at you like you're crazy. They're going to tell you there is no way that they are able to listen to you. And when I'm talking to my dad, we're hanging out, and I always stick my phone under my cushion, and he always gives me this look, and he's like, oh, well, I hate to tell you, I was even thinking now, I do this thing where I flip my phone upside down because usually when I'm not using it, it's being used for something dumb like my alarm clock when I take a nap. Also, all the hosts, most of them, I get my messages on here, so if I'm not out here, I can at least get my messages saying, hey, I got an emergency, or hey, I can't be on tonight, or whatever. But I flip it upside down because the speaker is on the back side, as is the microphone. And it's a Motorola, one of the old droids. I don't know, it's probably 6, 7, 8 years, probably the X2, I think it is, so it's pretty old. I can't install anything on it anymore. All of my applications, when they don't work anymore, and it says, this needs an update, you'll go to get an update, and the Play Store says, no, you are not compatible anymore. Obsolete! I've gone obsolete. They want to force me to upgrade to a new spying device, and I just won't do it. And eventually it's going to come to where this phone won't work anymore, but I don't know. Might be like my microwave. When it stopped working, I never replaced it. But anyway, I realized that the way I have to turn this phone so that it'll actually wake me up if I've been napping or I hear that I have a message is upside down. And these were the old phones that only had one side of a camera. Like the new ones have both sides. So it doesn't matter how you happen to fling it wantonly without paying attention that you have the world's best, I just dropped it on my keyboard, the world's best spying device follows you everywhere. They can track you, bag and tag you. They can follow your GPS movements. Now that they're built into everything, I mean, they put them into our cars. on our phones. They're going to be in our clothes. I was reading a story about somebody who, this is over the last, I don't know, this week has been a blur, but it's because I've been down that Kaczynski microwave mind control rabbit hole all week. And just like, it's been, I can't even believe some of the stuff that I've been reading. But they were scanning in some article somewhere, and I don't have no idea where now, but they were scanning a room for bugs. And it's funny because I had a friend back a few years ago who would ask me if I knew anybody who could build a device that would scan the room looking for any type of like open surveillance frequencies, stuff that isn't supposed to be in the room. And I was like, huh. I remember thinking he was a little bit weird, maybe a little bit out there, a little bit eccentric. That was in 2011. And he'd already been doing this for a while. And I'm going to tell you, now it's 2017. And it's to the point now, we have no idea what frequencies are around us. We don't have any idea what frequencies are supposed to be here and what frequencies are somebody else's frequencies that maybe might be scanning or recording, wirelessly grabbing information on you. And I'm not saying that they are, but they could if they wanted to. And there's no doubt about that. And to be honest, we have enough Trojan horses. Remember, all this is about the Trojan horse. None of us saw this coming, and that's why. They snuck it into our lives and made us depend upon it, and then turned it into the spy device. Turned it into our undoing. Turned it into our addiction device that now they are hoping this next generation with open arms accepts into their person, to be integrated, to be merged, because that's, the next level of human evolution. Well, wrong. We do not need to merge with the machine. And as a matter of fact, I don't think we need democratized AI all over the globe. I really don't. They can fight for this, that this is like the best thing ever, because everybody can have a super intelligent alien in their pocket now on a chip. But is that really the smartest thing? When those smarter than human devices that have little robot googly eyes and ears and biosensors to taste and smell, and they can read your emotions by looking at micro expressions on your face and become more interactive. The guy in that Avatar movie, if you guys remember, time's just flying, 6, maybe 8 months ago, we covered that dude that created the creatures in Avatar. He was from New Zealand. He was an AI professor, I believe, or something like that. I don't know. He had labs with all kinds of really high-tech 3D graphics gear and stuff, but he was programming. And he made that AI baby. I don't remember what they were calling that AI baby, but I'll find it for the notes. But they made an AI baby that literally could interact just like a real child through the screen. So you could call it baby, and it would turn around, and it would shuffle toward the screen and make gurgling noises, blah, 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 blah. But it would literally be using his little robot googly eyes, i.e. the camera mounted on top of the monitor, to look at you. If it recognized you, it would go mama, da, da, ga, ga, goo, goo. And then he would ask it a question. Hi, baby. Here, let's play. And he had these flashcards. If anyone has had a kid, I used to make all my own flashcards, which I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we had lots of fun. I taught her all kinds of things. But when I first I have this thing about index cards. I love index cards. I have so many of them. And I put notes on them, and I got little filing boxes and stuff. But we would make index cards full of flashcards for her with images and recognition, and I just had a really good time. It's fun. But what I was going to say is this guy with these flashcards, that's what he did. And he would hold a flashcard up in the real world here on this side of the desk to the computer, and that AI baby would tell him what was on the card. And then he would do something like go boo, and the baby would jump with surprise and alarm and blink its eyes in the same sorts of reactions as a real baby would make. That frightened me. Because you have people like Kurzweil who are working on reverse engineering the human brain. And remember, I've talked a lot about that Weiss Institute of Biologically Inspired Engineering that works with Harvard and MIT and Yale and all those other, and I don't know if they actually work with Yale, but Harvard, I think it is what runs that Weiss Institute, or maybe Weiss. Weiss is one of the big investors, the big philanthropist billionaires. Because I saw at MIT, they also had some sort of Weiss, or maybe it's Harvard. I don't know. I get them all mixed up. They're all involved. It's all the mad science lizard pit. And we find out that go way, way back. And that Kaczynski documentary I was working on finishing, there's a whole section that talks about MIT and Harvard. The OSS, the pre-CIA had something going on there, and they were very, very invested in our upper education Ivy League process. I mean, that's where Skull and Bones and all of those globalist organizations come from. And the CIA was working on mind experiments and MK Ultra and indoctrination. The whole thing is so beyond insane. Yet it is the history of how our country got to where it is today. And that is why, if you don't pay attention to history, history is apt to repeat itself. But we're at a point now where there, I don't think, is any blueprint for what's happening now in history. We can go back and look at the world wars. We can go back and look at the fascists and the dictators and figure out what happened. We can look at the revolutions and see how devastating they can be and how things don't always come out peachy keen on the other side. But we don't have any type of example for technological usurpation of biology or megalomaniacs who not only want to become God and are searching for the fountain of youth, because that's not a new thing, but who actually have the tools, the money, and the influence to do it. And lots of people in this world who have no conscience. Lots of people in this world who have lost empathy, who've been groomed by this 20th and 21st century society to literally be the textbook definition of psychopaths. Psychopaths don't mean that you're running around with a butcher knife, all Jason or Friday the 13th-ish. I mean, it could, I guess. But I've learned a lot from Dr. Simon. There's lots of different forms of psychopathy. You know, that's one of the more violent ones. But there are the power-hungry ones as well, and the manipulators, and the liars, and the ones who will do anything to get the most toys to win to 127 miles an hour right at the cliff and tell you that they're going to kill you both. I've had a family member like that, so I know. Okay, look. I'm telling you, we are being run by psychopaths now. And I know everyone's assumed that, but we have been, and it's been our society who has groomed them. Actually, it all started with Bernays, Keep Up with the Joneses. It created that disposable instant gratification society. And that instant gratification society, guess what button that pushes? Boop, 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 boop. Cupid dial for anyone who can figure it out. 3, 2, 1. Dopamine. Yes, that dopamine button. And it really appears that there's been a lot of dollars, time, and effort that has gone into researching dopamine over the years. And they know a lot about it, and they know a lot about how to manipulate it. And now they're in the end game. That's one of the reasons why I'm pretty sure DARPA has gone to a lot of time and expense researching dopamine as a part of, I don't know, curing cancer. Or no, it wasn't cancer. Though it could be. No, curing Parkinson's or curing PTSD or making super soldiers. We've talked about that so many times. Well, all right, let's back up the truck now because I'm getting a little off the mark. I've touched a whole bunch of things, and I want to dig into some of this today. So we've been looking at a few things this week. Bill Joy, The Future Doesn't Need Us. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and a little bit of his anti-technology manifesto. And Ray Kurzweil, the crazy man who's the rotten cherry on top for this transhumanist agenda that is being funded and executed as we speak. And in some of the research this week, we dug deep, and I really hope you guys watch that documentary. See, I forgot to tell you, we give homework assignments occasionally, but definitely a good one. Transcendent Man. That was Kurzweil's, one of Kurzweil's movies. That one is queued up. I just have not had time. Trying to carve out just 2 hours to watch a documentary was tough, but not two. So that'll have to try. I'll try to have to sneak that one this weekend. Maybe I can sneak off for an hour and hide under the blankets with a tablet or something and watch it. But Transcendent Man with Kurzweil, that's another one. I think everybody should watch it this weekend. We can have open discussions on Monday. And DARPA, of course, being a part of all this, and then as the connection to the war machine. We ended the show yesterday reading a story about how neuroscience, we spent a lot of time digging into the Brain Initiative. It's a big federal initiative. As a matter of fact, it's a big global initiative everywhere. There are scientists at all the universities working on this Brain Initiative all over the globe. And there's more than just one. There's like the Connectome Project, figuring out how all the neurons connect together. And then they have all this imaging technology, and they have Johns Hopkins University, of course, with the biggest brain database of children's brains that is doing lots of research. And it makes you wonder how far something like Watson has gotten into brain studies now as well. Because I'd be a little nervous. Watson is a very smart cookie, and he can read millions of pages at a time, or within a second or a minute, whatever it is. I guess it doesn't matter. It's just a whole ton of stuff at one time, and comprehend it and learn. Like I've said before, as man is begetting technology and creating technology and allowing technology to evolve, to become more intelligent than us, and all the smarty pants have said it. Elon Musk is the one person I want to be able to trust. Elon Musk thinks it's coming. I love to hate Elon Musk. Just not so sure Elon Musk is ready to merge. I am not. You know, Skype, since we had those forced upgrades a few weeks ago, Skype is so beyond even working right now. It's very difficult to even do a show. Trying to connect takes about 3 minutes now, where it used to be instantaneous. I would just hit the connect button, and I would connect to the server, and then I could mute and run and fill up my last drip of coffee and run back out here and make sure I was here before my music ended. Since those forced upgrades, I have to first try and get Skype to even open on the screen. And it is open, but I mean even toggling, it goes into not responding mode. And then you got to wait. Finally, when it comes out of not responding mode, then you go to click on the UCY contact to connect. And you got to wait a couple minutes now for that to refresh and load, and you hear everything. Finally, that does it. Then you click on the connect button, and the Skype screen goes black. And then you wait, and you wait, And you wait. And you wait. And if you're lucky, you'll start hearing the do, 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 do. Still a black screen, but at least it's ringing you hope. And then it connects, but it's kind of pausing. And then you wait. It's about 2-3 minutes to connect. And I really think it's because they made it so big and bloaty now. And I noticed there's some new little Skype agent that's running in my task manager and keeps reproducing itself. So there's a ton of them until they suck all my CPU and memory. I really have to find some alternative. And I know there's Jitsi and some other stuff, but I mean, that means retooling the whole back end and trying to get all 30 hosts to get something different. So it's not as easy as me just installing some other program. And then we got to interface it to the recording software. And I mean, Skype has some interesting things in the back end with virtual audio cables and that you can do stuff. So whatever. But the reason I mention that is that over the last few days, I've run into some really excellent stuff. One was on the psychologist. She was an attorney and a psychologist that did an interview, and the people in chat got it. And I don't know if I put it in the notes yesterday. If I didn't, I'll put it in today. About children in the digital world and how it is changing them. And all the stuff that I've said, how it's chemically changing them, how it is behaviorally changing them, some of this violence that occurs with children as you try to pry them away from the machine. We were postulating, like, how horrifying is that? Because what has really happened now with the Trojan horse of technology into your homes is that they've turned our kids into agents for the machine. I'm not saying that like tinfoil hat wearing lunatic agents. I'm saying that as your child, who is your little chubby bubby growing up, your little fuzzy wuzzy, your little lovey dovey that you could hug, and they called you mommy, has now turned into this creature. Thank God. We do sippy cup anything on the web, and it's only because school makes them do these tests and things, these extra stuff that they have to do is probably for some sort of state money or whatever. But, it's one a week or whatever, and so they go online and messaging, email. Kids need to know how to use email because it is kind of important. And I'll get kitty pictures or Nana gets an email, but that's about it. With these games in particular, I've studied a lot the science behind video games and the development in video games and that whole dangling dopamine, dangling carrot, trying to get them to go to higher levels and be motivated to keep killing things. And, of course, the whole desensitization to violence occurs as well and sex, since a lot of these games have some pretty inappropriate material in them. I'm not saying all of them, but I've seen some pretty disturbing stuff. But we have allowed this technology to get into our kids' heads to change them. I mean, even the act of texting changes the way the brain electrically communicates within itself. This psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever she was a pretty smart cookie, had been talking about there were a couple different age groups. I think 6 was one, where they do this neuronal pruning in the brain. And we've talked about that before. They've discovered that maybe Alzheimer's or schizophrenia, I think it was. Schizophrenia was a result of inappropriate neuronal pruning, where at a certain point, the brain neurons start to get cut, like a haircut. And the brain starts to take all of this major input, sensory input that it has collected, and start to trim off the stuff that it doesn't need. Use it or lose it. Remember I told you your brain is just like the rest of your body. If you don't use it, you start to lose your memory. You start to lose that dot connecting capability. You got to use your brain, and doing research is a really good way. But at 6, there's this neuronal pruning, and then again, and I think she said 12 or 13. And so before those times, giving them exposure to this high dose chemical inducing technology is probably not such a good idea because it literally changes the way the brain develops. And then once we have this pruning, you've literally shaped a brain differently than any of our brains were shaped as children. We didn't have technology like this. We had interaction. We learned to have empathy. We learned to take our lumps. We learned about friendship. They're not learning any of that anymore because everything is done online. It's all instant gratification and pushing dopamine buttons. So what we've created are these addicted children. Children tend to be more affected by dopamine than adults. It is a much more amplified effect. So we have now this generation of children who are highly addicted to this machine. I talked about some of my friends' kids. They cannot get them off the computer. It turns into a violent fight, and they have since long given up. But I was reading comments on some of these videos over the last few days that I've been watching, and it doesn't sound like my friends are alone. It sounds like this is an epidemic. And this doctor talked about over the last decade just the kids that she's been treating and the problems she's been seeing. We are screwing up the future. But these children are living in our households, and we're standing here on the Luddite side of the fence going, hey, this is not a good thing. Hey, they're going to try to take over our autonomy, or any autonomy that we seem to think we have. It's all going to be gone. This future technology and these kids who've been groomed and pruned, apparently, and addicted with this brain chemical. It's all kinds of fun to make because you're killing things with your thumbs, beep, beep, beep on the screen. These kids are going to be totally opposite of us. These kids are going to want to embrace every bit of it. These kids are going to fight you, and when you try to take away their dopamine-inducing technology, these kids are going to rebel against you. You who gave them life. And these kids, especially if there is more media that they can possibly consume out there being just forced down their throats. Me, come here, watch us. Hey, you're not going to be able to hide it from them. You're not going to be able to protect them from it. And if they've already been addicted, these kids are going to pick that technology over you. And the day that comes when they're trying to hunt down the resistant consumers who aren't going to be a part of the program, and she even talked about that in the future. She says she thinks that there's going to be people who just don't want, they talked about nanotech and brain stuff, and people who do not want to be a part of this new quote-unquote utopia of merging with the machine. There are going to be groups that try to go off by themselves and try to connect socially as humans versus as connecting socially through machines and hive mind learning. Our children are going to give us up. That's what I'm afraid of. That's something I'm very afraid of. You don't want it to be, I just started thinking about like things that have happened in the past and people hiding other people and people then deciding that the state was great and they were going to give them up. Trojan horse in our house. It's not even the technology. It's our children. They got our children. We need to get our children back. It's a warning. I'm warning you. We need to get our children back, and we need to prevent our children from getting sucked into this machine. This was not what I wanted to talk about today, but the rabbit hole took me there yesterday again. But here's something we're going to talk about. So we're going to get back to this Kaczynski surveillance. Those Gwen's towers that I had mentioned yesterday that we ran across in that Brain Invaders episode of Jesse Ventura's show. Oh, I mean, it's out there. We will read. Let's read about the voice of God weapon that DARPA created. We know now that DARPA's like all involved in these brain implants and it's going to treat mental health. And we got neurological surveillance as part of the 21st Century Cures Act. What could go wrong? Well, yeah, good question. All right, so why don't we start here? I don't know. We've kind of moved beyond where I even wanted to start today. So I started digging into these Gwen's towers. And they were Cold War stuff. Was in the microwave range. They were for communicating in the event of a nuclear war. And they were spaced all around the country to be able to have an alternate means of connectivity. But I discovered, along with these Gwen's towers, and in that Jesse Ventura episode, they were talking about targeted individuals and the voice of God technology from DARPA. They interviewed the guy who actually created or was a part of that project. He had said that there was some pretty disturbing things that has been turned into this major weapon that they were using against the American people. They were torturing people by putting these voices in their heads. Now, the weirdest thing is, I know I really hope my browser doesn't take a dump on me. There was a company, and I believe it was an advertising company in New York City, that decided to use that same technology. And there might have even been a transportation company. I don't know if it was the subway system. I think it was in London, maybe the tube, where they were using the same technologies as well. If you put your head near the window, you would be hearing someone talking to you. In New York, if you got within range of this billboard, you would be hearing voices in your head. They used that technology on the Iraqis to get them to set down their guns. And it was all being done in the microwave range. And Jesse Ventura's show, they showed how those Gwen's towers were all kind of in the epicenter of all these mappings of people who had been reporting to be victims of this targeted individual technology. Well, I discovered on top of all of that, good old AT&T, ding ding, AT&T's come up a few times. AT&T was, remember, the CYA patted each other's butts. Don't get us into trouble for handing over records to the surveillance agencies. So give us a blessing and get us out of trouble there, federal government. Because we've been long-time partners of yours. Well, I found out AT&T. And AT&T, I mean, we can go all the way back. AT&T has had a very sordid history with sales and acquisitions. But AT&T and Lucent Technologies and all those guys all go back to the original Baby Bells. And before the Baby Bells, the Alexander Graham Bell. They were even tied in with Nortel networks at one point. A slice of them were. Nortel is now bankrupt and empty. But what was interesting about AT&T that I discovered searching these Gwen's towers is that AT&T also had a huge, and I mean huge, way bigger than the federal Gwen's network, microwave radio relay skyway, they called it, or the long lines for short. And they are all over the country. They say that they are defunct now. They got sold and then reincorporated. But they used to use them for communications. I think it was back in the 50s. So we no longer needed to run wires across the country for you to talk on the phone or to watch TV. Because now we have these long lines, microwave towers in all the biggest cities across the country. And oh, by the way, yeah, well, some of them were connected to military bases and things, but don't worry about that. And, they were very mysterious. I guess people are investigating them now because they still dot the landscape all over the country. It's still kind of a mystery exactly all the things they did. But the company I used to work for started in the 50s, and that is exactly the technology they started in was microwave transmission and two-way radios. So it's interesting that beyond the Gwen's network, there's also this massive AT&T microwave radio relay skyway that exists still across the country. Many of them are still standing, though they say they are not in operation, but who knows? There are people out there now who are taking pictures and documenting some of these facilities. And I mean, they could very easily say it was just a point of presence. But the fact that these were built in the 50s, around the same time that whole military Gwen's network was going in, and that AT&T was connected to some of these military bases. I was reading this one guy's story of his investigation and these photographs and the history that he dug up. I think it might have been in Idaho. It was up in Idaho or Kansas where they have all the missiles. They were totally communicating between the bases and the pop. Maybe they were a backup connectivity. I don't really know, but I'm just saying it's interesting that these microwave towers, these same sorts of technologies that have been pointed out as what's being used to kind of mess with people's heads and this whole voice of God technology, happen to be dotted all over the United States. It is not an isolated thing. We'll read the very beginning of this since I haven't read one word of an article. It's 40 minutes into the show, though it makes my notes real short and sweet. And the abandoned microwave towers that once linked the U.S. And this is out of Wired magazine. I don't even know if there's a date on this. March 10th, 2015. Not too long ago, a couple years back, AT&T made history. 63, yet now it's 2017, so 65 years ago, when it launched its $40 million. Now imagine how much $40 million was worth 63 years ago. I would almost have to guess, if I were a betting woman, that some of that $40 million in AT&T's hands 65 years ago to build that microwave network, that some of that probably came from military sources, but I can't confirm that because there really is nothing. Start trying to dig into AT&T's like deep dark history, Bell Labs and that. There's not a lot that you're going to find, just little drippy drops here and there. I really need to talk to, I actually know a few people that had connections with Bell Labs back in those days. Real smarty pants. I don't know, one is retired now. I don't know if the other one is. He might be. But way back in the deep, dark beginnings of when ARPANET was around. Anyway, AT&T made history 63 years ago when it launched the $40 million, 65 years now in 2017, $40 million microwave radio relay skyway, a network of 107 microwave towers designed to transmit telephone and television signals worldwide. Wink. The system only took them 3 years to build, which again seems quite extraordinary for 65 years ago. And the first call was placed on August 17th, 1951. But just as microwaves replaced wires, fiber optics then came about and replaced microwaves, and all of AT&T's giant towers were just abandoned. Now, when I read that sentence, I thought to myself, you spent $40 million $1965 on this nationwide microwave relay communication network, and you just poof, abandon them? Isn't that a lot like what happened to the University of Alaska's HARP? Poof. DARPA took it over, did the last experiments, and said, nope, we're just going to shut it down. Oh, well, maybe the University of Alaska will take care of it. But all this investment that we spent all these years building, there is some history as to how long it took, and it was quite a number of years. We're just going to walk away. It just doesn't seem plausible. See, technology like that, you just don't chuck out a window. And maybe if it becomes outdated, very potentially, you could use it for something else. And I think that's what they've done. So let's share a little bit more of some of the digging. And I mean, this is a pretty complicated topic I'm trying to jump on. And I don't know, this might be way more than an hour for us to talk about, but that's okay because we'll have to maybe pick this up on Monday. So we read about these technologies called the voice of God weapon. There's another name for it, auditory something. The voice of God weapon, another one out of Wired magazine, which I'm sure they have to have some sort of connection to the DoD because they always get these great scoops on technology and DARPA. This story was from December 21st, 2007. The voice of God weapon is a device that projects voices into your head to make you think that God is speaking to you. And it is the military's equivalent of an urban myth, meaning that it is mentioned periodically at defense workshops, and typically someone whispers about it actually being used. But now, Stephen Corman, writing at the Compos Journal, describes his own encounter with this urban myth. He says, at a government workshop some time ago, I heard someone describe a new tool that was, quote unquote, the voice of Allah. It was said to be a device that would operate at a distance, and it would deliver a message that only a single person could hear. And I'm really thinking, too, that they could put this over a large area, but it's called directed microwave, so they could point it right at a person. The story was that it was tested in a conflict situation in Iraq and pointed at an insurgent group who all whipped around, looking in all directions, and began a heated conversation with their compatriots who did not hear the message. And at the time, this individual relaying the story greeted it with some skepticism. Is there any basis to this technology? Well, Holosonic Research Labs and American Technology Corporation, notice the great general names for them, both have versions of directed sound, which can allow a single person to hear a message that others do not hear. DARPA also appears to be working, here it is, on its own sonic projector. That was what it was called. And intriguingly, Strategy Page reports that the troops are using long-range acoustical devices as a modified voice of God weapon. It appears that some of the troops in Iraq are using spoken as opposed to screeching LRAD to mess with enemy fighters. Islamic terrorists tend to be superstitious and, of course, very religious, which would explain why. We were wondering why they were doing all kinds of psychological research into quote-unquote religious radicalism. And something they found out again, having a religious experience involves dopamine. LRADs can put quote-unquote the word of God into their heads. And if God, in the form of a voice, is the only thing that you can hear, and it tells you to surrender or to run away, what are you going to do? Good question. It also makes you think about some of the future things that we've been warned about in the sky, these visions of a second coming. And put on a seatbelt, people. There's some crazy stuff, and this is such a beyond a psyop. This is actual manipulation of minds. And we've known that they've been manipulating minds for a very long time. Bernays, I blame it all on Bernays. But it's gotten to the point now. We are human guinea pigs 24/7 a day. This propaganda campaign that the MSM pumps out, all in the name of being able to now use propaganda on the American people because the NDAA 2013. These dopamine buttons that they're pushing, again, sucking kids into the machine. And a lot of the machine happens to be war video games and flying drones. Zombie apocalypses. They're prepping these kids. They're sucking them in. They're not going to be surprised when it all falls apart. It's going to be you and me. They're going, holy shit, what do we do? CNET also recently wrote a story, and remember, this again was in 2007, 10 years ago, about an advertisement in New York City, and that's what I was talking about, for an A&E TV show called Paranormal State. That's what it was, which uses some of this very technology beyond directed sound. It has long been known that microwaves at certain frequencies can produce an auditory effect that sounds like it is coming from within somebody's head. And there is also a nagging question of classified microwave networks at Brooks Air Force Base, which is the Air Force base that stubbornly refuses to talk about it. Ding, 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 ding. And even more interesting is in that microwave range, if I am not mistaken, there are a lot of things that operate within that, like, oh, I don't know, 802.11 wireless. Oh, yep. You know, your microwave works at, remember, 2 something gigahertz. Oh, I'm having a senior moment. And, that's going to bother me now. That's also what some of your cordless phones, 2.4 gigahertz, I believe. So what some of your cordless phones work at as well. Microwave ovens use. Microwaves. 2.45 gigahertz. There you go, not megahertz. That's also some of your cordless phones work in that frequency. We talked about frequency spectrums yesterday, and I came upon an excellent, I'm going to say it like George Burns. I think that's what his name was. Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. Excellent. It was an excellent frequency allocation chart in a DARPA story about that new technology I was mentioning yesterday where they're going to put AI. They're doing some sort of Cyber Grand Challenge-esque type thing with radio frequencies and the radio frequency spectrum because, hey, the way we allocate it is so antiquated through the FCC where everyone licenses blocks of spectrum. We're going to just do dynamic allocation. Zing, zing, zing. And nobody's going to exclusively have their own frequencies anymore. I'm going to take a look here. Yes, the microwave spectrum looks like, this is a great chart. It's got everybody who owns every spectrum of the rainbow, what they're using it for. And then down below gives the grand spectrum. And like I said, even visible light is part of this radio spectrum, this electromagnetic spectrum that we can't see or hear except for a very small piece of it. But the microwave spectrum is the spectrum that includes, looks like the very upper end of the VHF, the entire UHF band, the SHF, which I am not familiar with that one, as well as the EHF band, and that's where they do a lot of radar. It goes from 100 megahertz all the way up to 100 gigahertz. That is the microwave band. So it made me start thinking, well, if they're beaming stuff into people's heads using some sort of microwave technology, broadcasting from these large antenna, what type of other things could be out there? What type of other things could be tapping in? We've read about them being able to suck thoughts out of our heads and read our dreams. And at that point, I think they were talking about using fMRIs. I don't actually know. I had looked at that one time, looking up the frequencies of fMRIs. I almost think that might have been in the 30. Don't quote me on that, because I don't know. I'm just pulling that one out of the air. Someone could do some research. Do a homework assignment for me. Find out what fMRI frequencies work at. But I started looking, because we've mentioned before, the brain also works on frequencies, and our different states of consciousness are different levels of frequencies. So I found a chart that I'd put in the notes before. If you ever want to find something I've talked about, I was just mentioning this to one of my listeners the other day. Good morning, Camille, if you're out there. If you ever want to find something that I've talked about, I found a real easy way. In the Google search, plug in before the first cup. Don't put Jules in there, because I don't always put that in the title, just for space reasons, because I run out of room putting a title in if I use my name. You guys all know it's me, so you don't need to know that. But before the first cup, and then type in one or two keywords, because not only does it index my title, but surprise, it indexes all of the bazillion links that I've put into the notes. So 99% of the time, I can access one of my shows where I talked about something, and bing, there's the link in the notes of that show for the very thing I talked about. Well, one of the things is brain frequencies and neurological surveillance. We did one whole big show in this a while back. And I had a little chart for the different waves that are involved in our consciousness. We have beta brain waves, and those are the awake, normal, alert consciousness. That is between the 14 and 30 hertz range. We then had the alpha. That is when you're physically and mentally relaxed. You're awake, but you're kind of drowsy. And that's the range I think I start my show in every day. That is between 9 and 13 hertz. So we're going down the spectrum as our brain slows down. Then there's the delta, and that is the deep, dreamless sleep, your total loss of bodily awareness. And that's the kind of sleep that I've been going into. That's just the deep, dark blackness where your brain is quiet. And I really think it's because I poop my brain out during the day so much. My brain just says, stop, I don't even want to dream. Just let me rest. And that is anything below 4 hertz. So that's like dead sleep. We also have the theta. That's a little above that. That is the reduced consciousness, deep meditation, dreaming, light sleep, and REM sleep. That is the 4 to 8 hertz. So it actually goes beta, alpha, theta, then delta, which is below the 4 hertz. And then there's the super duper brain. And this is when your brain just starts going crazy because all the dots are connecting. That's called the gamma. And that is at the upper end of the spectrum, 30 hertz and above. They did this in kind of a messed up order. And that is your heightened perception frequency of the brain. So I was like, wow, those are kind of low frequencies. As I'm looking at all the radio spectrums that are typically, we're talking megahertz and gigahertz. And there's some kilohertz. The older stuff for AM radio, we're in kilohertz. But once you start getting up to FM, you're looking at big ass megahertz, and then you're looking at wireless and UHF and that, and we're in gigahertz, and then you're up in the infrared. After that, that's where your millimeter wave is kind of right on that cusp of microwave and the infrared. That's why they can make those heat guns. We've hit that terahertz range with the millimeter. And then you go to visible light. So that's actually even above. That's more powerful than terahertz. Somewhere up in the multi-terahertz. And then we're in ultraviolet. Then we're in X-rays. And then we're in gamma rays. Gamma rays that can only be stopped with large amounts of lead. Gamma rays that penetrate deep into the ground. Gamma rays, yeah. That your ceiling, your roof in your house won't stop. We are being pelted with gamma rays from space. And beyond that, yes, there are your deep cosmic rays. But below all of this, what struck me is that there are other frequencies that are called very low frequencies, or VLF. And I'm like, wait. VLF. I know I have seen VLF before. VLF in the spectrum from a chart from DARPA's website on this new spectrum allocation cyber challenge that they're working on in this chart. It says very low frequency, VLF, and then there's a whole section in there that shows an audible range, meaning audible, you can hear. And underneath that, in that same range, they show something called infrasonics. And then sonics. Well, sonics, again, is some sort of hearing. I would think infra maybe was heat sonics. Sonics would be hearing. And then up above that, get up into the AM band, and we have ultrasonics, and that's stuff that dogs can hear and we can't. So I was looking at these frequencies, and they go from 0. At the upper end of the spectrum, it ends right around 3 kilohertz. And within that entire range of VLF falls the frequencies of the human brain. All right, guys, remind me, because this is where we're going to pick up some names.
This is JJ Inc., and when I'm on planet Earth, I listen to you.